After reading The Hunger Games and having various discussions in class, I decided that income inequality would be my main focus for this project. Throughout this presentation, I will be portraying what I wrote about in my essay, but with pictures, answering the question of whether or not billionaires should exist. Because of income inequality, there is a wage gap between the top 1% of earners and the lower 99% of earners. This begs the question, should billionaires exist? Suzanne Collins and I say no. However, since they do, Peter Singer's theory on famine, affluence, and morality claims that the rich have a moral obligation to help the poor. Panem, where Katniss lives, is a now destroyed United States with 12 districts in the capital. The 12 districts are home to the extremely poor, while the capital is home to the extremely wealthy. The U.S., on the other hand, does not appear to have this extreme divide. On the outside looking in, the United States appears wealthy and prosperous, as we are often referred to as the land of opportunity. What is often overlooked, though, is the unequal distribution of wealth known as income inequality. This presentation seeks to examine the parallels between the Hunger Games and the United States and expose income inequality in this country. Suzanne Collins explores the disparities between impoverished people and wealthy people in Panem, with the picture on the left representing the capital and the picture on the right representing the districts. An example of this is the manner in which Katniss feeds her family by hunting illegally. Although Katniss knows that, quote, poaching carries the severest of penalties, unquote, she risks her entire life for one meal for her family. In contrast, the citizens of the capital get to live with an abundance of resources. When Katniss showers at home, she uses a barrel with barely warm water. However, when she showers at the capital, quote, the shower has a panel with more than 100 options you can choose, regulating water temperature, water pressure, soaps, shampoos, scents, oils, and massaging sponges, unquote. So, while the poor have minimal resources for necessities, the rich have excessive resources for necessities, and then some. To make matters worse, the rich have all the power, and they play the poor like chess pieces. The poor can never rebel, but not only because it is a guaranteed loss, but because their focus is the families that they can barely afford to feed. The capital uses this to their advantage with tesserae, a 1-year supply of grain and oil, which a family can request at the cost of entering one's name in the bowl for the Hunger Games. In a way, poor people have to increase their chances of death in order to survive. To further exert their power, the rich offer an incentive for the involuntary participation in the games. The winning district gets grain, oil, and sugar. The rich assert their dominance and maintain it with conditions such as these. While Suzanne Collins' The Hunger Games is a fictional story, the disparities between the rich and the poor is certainly real. In this past episode of Patriot Act with Hassan Minhaj, he pointed out, quote, the richest 400 Americans own more wealth than the bottom 150 million adults, unquote. I did more research on this and found that the median household income of the lower 99% is $63,179, while the median household income of the top 1% is over $300,000. I normally do not care too much about what is in other people's pockets. At least, I didn't until Hassan Minhaj said something else that I found interesting. That, and I quote, 30% of all charitable donations this year are expected to come not from the top 1%, but the top half of the 1%. Although the top 1% in this country are the ones with the most money, they're the ones who will make the least amount of charitable donations and contributions. The divide between the rich and the poor is so deeply ingrained in this country that it is the main talking point in the presidential debates as the presidential election gets closer and closer. Recently, when asked about this divide, Bernie Sanders responded, quote, "We should demand that the wealthiest top 1/10 of the 1% start paying their fair share of taxes so that we can create a nation and a government that works for all of us." Unquote. This belief that the wealthy have an obligation to the poor stems from Peter Singer's theory of famine, affluence, and morality. Singer's theory is a solution to this moral problem in society. Singer assumes that everyone can agree that, quote, "suffering and death from lack of food, shelter, and medical care are bad," unquote. This is universally accepted, yet no one wants to do anything about it because of the brainwashed belief that they too will be rich someday, and because of the widely known quote that life is unfair. However, Singer sees otherwise. He believes that if the rich can, quote, "prevent something bad from happening without thereby sacrificing anything of comparable moral importance, they ought, morally, do it," unquote. The rich certainly can help the poor while simultaneously living lavishly. They just choose not to fulfill their moral obligation, claiming that they worked hard for their money and claiming not to want to give handouts to the poor. To further his point, Singer gives an example of a drowning child. In this instance, the child drowning is bad, and dirty clothes and shoes are the insignificant thing with not comparable moral significance. This situation parallels what is happening with American society right now. The drowning child represents the poor, literally drowning in debt, bills, and work. The only difference is that the rich do not want to get their shoes and clothes dirty, even though they're rich enough to buy new ones. Where science fiction highlights a problem with society, ethics emphasizes a solution. Collins's novel comments on American society's path should the United States continue down this rocky road, while Singer's theory tells us that the rich can prevent a society like Panem from ever becoming. Together, these works tell us that billionaires should not exist. However, they do, and because of that, they must help the rest of us.